Hey Hasbro, this is a tough subject to broach, but I think I can fix your movie problem. It's going to be tough though. It's not an easy thing to do. I totally get that, but it's going to require something from you that I think is going to be the toughest part of this of all, which is you're going to have to learn to listen. What's up, Internet? Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine, and today I'm going to talk about the G.I. Joe movies, as well as Hasbro's other ventures into the movie industry, where they've succeeded, where they've failed. This is maybe a long and meandering process, so if this gets too long, my apologies in advance. But let's start with a little bit of history. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan had basically loosened FCC regulations on what was considered acceptable TV in the form of commercialism. Before this, actually Mattel and Hanna-Barbera had gotten together and tried a Hot Wheels cartoon, and the FCC squashed that thing like a bug. But after Reagan's loosening of these situations, these restrictions, the toy industry basically went into a boom. It was the Wild West. Every toy that was out there had an accompanying cartoon or some similar media property. Some of them were cartoons first, some of them were toys first, but it really did become the whole, well, why would I collect this line? Did you see the cartoon? And of those, and there were tons of them. I mean, it wasn't just Hasbro. I mean, Mattel, Kenner, you name it. They got into the act because, again, there was money to be made. And there was a benefit to being able to produce your own characters for your own toy line. For one, the rampant idea of repainting. Look at like the Transformers. The three Seeker Jets were three individual characters, but they were also a way to get you to buy the same transforming F-15 Eagle 3 times. And that's true here as well. I mean, you could create a storyline that kids would enjoy and then also control the back end, the actual merchandising. Think of it like if George Lucas had owned Kenner outright. It would have been a whole different story. And that's really what happened here. Stating that, though, Hasbro really had 3 successful lines. Now, there were others, don't get me wrong, but when I say successful, I mean these are the ones that really stood the test of time. And barring anything like Star Wars or anything where it's an actual or Marvel or DC where there's a long-standing license that has nothing to do with this, and just focusing on their own properties, the 3 lines that really worked were G.I. Joe, Transformers, and My Little Pony. These are the ones that have really existed to this day. This is why we don't see 6-inch adult collectible Visionaries or 6-inch adult collectible Gem and Humanoids or Cops figures out there in the market. But you do see, plenty of high-end adult collectible Transformers and of course, the Classifieds line, as you see here in all of its 6-inch 1/12 scale glory. Of those 3, these 3 specifically did get movies in the 1980s. The first one was My Little Pony, and it failed miserably. And it failed miserably because it was pablum. Now look, I'm a cisgender male. I was, a boy when it came out, and I'm now pushing 50, and yeah, I was not in that core demographic. So for me to say it sucked, it was pablum, it was garbage, may seem like, it's just some guy who's hating on something that's not his cup of tea, but this was the general consensus. This was a very G-rated, Mew Mew Boo Boo kind of thing that a bunch of adults who were in their 40s and 50s at the time were writing for little girls. And the result was basically an intelligence insulting load of half nightmare fuel, half saccharine garbage. The movie didn't do well. It was a G-rated, oh, isn't that just cute movie. after that, of course, we got the Transformers. Now, G.I. Joe was in production with their movie at the same time, but we got Transformers first. And in fact, Transformers was rated PG because of Spike saying the word shit. This was a way that Hasbro could make it seem like this movie was meatier. This wasn't a god-awful kids film that you're going to have to sit through with your kids and wish you were dead. There is something that this might have a good story that was very interesting to you. And in fact, it was in a lot of ways Hasbro going back to the Marvel well. Unicron is basically Galactus. The Matrix of Leadership is basically the ultimate nullifier in a lot of ways. But the big problem that Hasbro had with this movie, it is a cult classic, and I do dig the movie myself. But the big problem was that Hasbro really had an ulterior motive with this film, which was a line refresh. Part of it, I think, was the fact that they didn't want to be reliant on Bandai's molds. So, other than Ultra Magnus, most of these were American-made toys with the futuristic designs, so that they could be the manufacturers and the people who set the story. And in doing so, they created a story where they literally killed off everybody you liked. Megatron was gone, Optimus Prime was gone, but now you have Rodimus Prime and Galvatron. You'll love them. They're so much better than that old crap. And it actually traumatized a ton of kids. I was not traumatized as much as I was confused. I was maybe a little older than I should have been collecting Transformers, and so my first thought was, we just saw these guys break into a billion pieces, and a million years later get rebuilt. Prime took like 5-6 shots, and now he's down? Huh? And of course, they would later bring Prime back. I've always thought that since they were already releasing Ultra Magnus, what they could have done, it would have been smarter, would have been to maybe put Optimus on some sort of life support and explain that the Ultra Magnus armor was effectively, some sort of like new life support or Iron Man type scenario. But again, I wasn't in the room. I didn't get a vote. Which leads us to G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe, at that point, didn't get a theatrical release because, they'd, bored parents to death with My Little Pony. They had traumatized all the boys with Transformers. And the idea that they were going to do the same thing with G.I. Joe was already in the works. It was also going to be a line refresh. We were going to kill off Cobra Commander and Duke and replace them with Falcon and Serpentor as our new, leading hero and leading villain, respectively. So instead, they took the 2.5 hour movie or so and cut it into 5 episodes and just showed it right in the syndicated animated time slot as part of the series. Even going so far as to have Doc, in a last minute kind of infamous moment of that movie, you get to see Duke here get a snake spear to the chest and fall over into a coma. We get this line for at the very end of the movie of Doc kind of in a voiceover going, "Duke's okay! He's okay! He's not dead! We are not going to replace Duke, okay? We learned our mistake with Optimus Prime." God! And that's really where, the G.I. Joe movie kind of ended and died on the vine. Which, as eventually these lines all did die on the vine at one point or another, and attempted refreshes happened throughout the 90s, we then move into the 2000s and we see where these lines evolve from there. So, going into the 2000s, the new millennium, if you will, we have these 3 franchises making a comeback. All 3 in some form or another, both in the toy lines and in movie theaters. And would you believe the most successful has really been My Little Pony? Now, I know what you're thinking out there, guys. See, you even make gung-ho faint with this stuff, man. Sick. I'm not a brony. I'm not here to praise and extol the virtues of My Little Pony. I'm still not a fan. The difference is I'm now a parent with a daughter who was a fan and still kind of is. She likes that stuff. I totally get it. And yes, I know the names of the main 6, not because I'm a brony, but because I'm a parent who's had to listen to them time and time and time again. Yes, I know Rarity from Applejack. I know Twilight Sparkle. I don't want to. This is the kind of thing where I'm thinking in my brain, why is it you remember this crap and not algebra? That's just the way it is, though. I guess it's how my brain is wired. Saying that, though, Lauren Faust was the showrunner for the show and the eventual movie, and even the new stuff, which is kind of built off that new mythology. The thing is that Faust was a huge My Little Pony fan as a little girl. She apparently worked at Cartoon Network for a while, worked on a ton of amazing shows, and had originally approached Hasbro with her own idea for a cartoon/toy line spin-off, and they had said to her, well, we're going to pass, but we have this franchise that we're looking to reboot called My Little Pony. Would you be interested in maybe spearheading that? And, oh my God, yes. And that is kind of where this is going to go. I think that the first thing that you need to learn, Hasbro, is why that worked is very simple. It's one word: passion. You took a woman who, as a little girl, loved your toys. She basically made a cartoon based on the play pattern that she had for them. She had admitted in some interviews where she had taken character X and and basically that was rarity. This one was Twilight Sparkle. This one was rarity. This one was the other ones whose names are thankfully escaping my head as I speak. And that's where those characters come from. Now, G.I. Joe was a little more structured, as was Transformers, but look at what we got. Michael Bay did several movies, all of which, he took a ton of liberties with. He was not a fan of the Transformers, and so the name Michael Bay, the name Steven Spielberg being on those marquees didn't mean squat. The first Transformers movie was horrible. I'm not a big fan of Shia LaBeouf to begin with, but he made a terrible Spike. All the pushed stuff with the gal that was in those as well, Megan Fox, didn't feel organic. It felt tacked on. We've got to have all this cheesecake to sell the movie. There were a couple of cool robot fight scenes, but really everything about that movie, to me as a fan of Transformers, felt wrong, and so wrong. And this, didn't change from film 1 to film 2. It's not like they fixed anything. They just kept going with this horrible narrative and with horrible designs and with horrible characters. Nobody needed to see Devastator's truck nuts, guys. He killed off RC because he didn't care for the character. This isn't somebody who was passionate about this project like, 100,000 trans fans out there who could have done an amazing job, And you see it again and again. Then we go to Bumblebee. Now, if you haven't seen Bumblebee or refuse to see Bumblebee, I get it, but I would recommend it. The first 10 minutes of that movie does more to feel like a Transformers movie than anything Bay had done before or since. It was perfect. The movie is a coming-of-age story. It's set in the 80s. It's a little schmaltzy, but that opening alone, this is one of those, watch the first 10 minutes and walk away, I get it. But stay for the rest, and it's a great movie. And honestly, this is why Snake Eyes was greenlit, I'm pretty sure. They'd had this idea for Bumblebee to be a soft reboot of the brand, which is, if Bumblebee sucked beyond suck and nobody went to go see it, so what? We've kept the license and we're good for that. It's an ash can in that respect. But if it's good, maybe we can cull some ideas of where this one went right that we could then use in rebooting the brand if we feel like it. And quite frankly, I think it would be a great idea. This is one of the reasons I went to go see Snake Eyes. Now, I'm going to back up for a second and go through the first two G.I. Joe movies, which were abhorrent. The first one, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan as well. I love Christopher Eccleston. When I heard he was going to be Destro, I was like, okay, that alone, I want to see this movie. Then I saw this movie. I was mildly upset at the fact that they chose Marlon Wayans to be in it as Ripcord. Why not just make him Stalker? But more than that, the whole story for the Baroness, where she was Duke's girlfriend before she was conveniently brainwashed, was just crap. I mean, it's one of those, why are we creating this overly complex plot, to give these two a connection when just making her a spoiled, rich, European with a noble title who has gone bad worked. It's what we had in the 80s. Nobody had to, we didn't have to overcomplicate the plot to make it more interesting or to make her Duke's girlfriend. Come on. The other big sin I think that movie made too was, Cobra Commander was also his best friend. All those just cheesy tropes. But more than that, when Cobra Commander first gets the idea to become Cobra Commander, it's after he meets Dr. Mindbender. Now, I get it. The original toy for Dr. Mindbender was cheesy as hell, and the idea that you're not going to have the handlebar mustache and shirtless Mindbender running around the movie, I'm cool with. Put him in a lab coat, that's fine. But you call this guy Dr. Mindbender, and then you kill him in like 30 seconds flat. This was basically Hasbro shooting themselves in the foot. For one, who's going to buy a figure of a nut job who was on screen for 30 seconds and then blew up? Even if you called him Dr. Mindbender, it's that, and this is something you see a lot of in Hollywood, is this idea of, we're going to name check something that the fans will realize is an Easter egg. True fans caught it! And in doing so, that's going to give us our geek cred as opposed to just, working with us. Now, Easter eggs are great, don't get me wrong, but if you can't do them well, or if the idea is just to kind of tick a box, then you're doing them wrong. Then we move on to Retaliation. With Retaliation, the real writing was on the wall, I think. The first movie was terrible. The second one killed off the entire cast to replace them with effectively The Rock and Bruce Willis. Now, with all due respect to The Rock, and I'm not trying to trash on The Rock or Bruce Willis, but these are those kind of name draws that they're there because of their name. You can kind of tell a movie is crappy when they get somebody like The Rock at times to be there just because it's like, hey kids, it's The Rock. You like The Rock. He's awesome. Go watch this movie with The Rock and Will Smith. It can't be sucky. It's got The Rock in it, and he's going to do his eyebrow cocking thing. And again, you killed off all your main characters. You killed off everyone from the first movie to make this about The Rock and his little group of Flint, Lady J, but of course Snake Eyes stays because Snake Eyes is Snake Eyes and you can't kill Snake Eyes. But really, that's what they did with this movie. They just iced all the good characters in hopes of, starting with this new cast that maybe this time you'll like it. These movies really felt like they might have had some Hasbro reps show up at the studio and start pitching ideas, and they were like, yeah, well, have you seen the Fast and the Furious? That's what we want. We want Fast and the Furious. We want this to be the next Fast and the Furious. Those things are amazing movies. Not really. But again, they really pushed this, this idea of what they wanted in the movie, and it was going to be high action. And, to killing off your crew, I mean, these are the characters that you're trying to sell, Hasbro. Why would you kill them off? Now, I get it. Soldiers die in a war story, but this is G.I. Joe. This isn't Band of Brothers. This isn't Saving Private Ryan. This is a show that originally had, every time a plane got shot down, 2 parachutes came out for a reason. And I think that that's one of those tropes. It's a little like, when you watch the Brady Bunch movie or Star Trek, you know that some of these things don't make a ton of sense, but you kind of let it go because at this point, it's the feel of the thing, I mean, hell, the Brady Bunch movie, I think, even did a brilliant job of spoofing all that. The very idea that they were living in the 90s but had that 70s mentality. But even like Star Trek, the main officers of the bridge go down on these missions. That does seem kind of stupid. But it's so ingrained of how many years of Star Trek that you kind of let it go. You kind of go with it more often than not. And that's really the first lesson I think here is, get somebody who's passionate behind the project and work with it. This is true with so many things. Speaking of Star Trek Lower Decks, Star Trek Lower Decks is a show run by a guy who started not with chumming up to Rick Berman or any of the Paramount muckety mucks, but he had a Twitter account where he created an 8th season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which ended up as a book. And some of it was silly, and some of it was cool, but it really was a love letter to Trek. And so when they hired him for Lower Decks, and I've heard people say, "Oh, Lower Decks sucks. It's basically Star Trek's ripoff of attempt to rip off Rick and Morty." No, it's brilliant. Watch it. You probably haven't watched it if you're saying those kind of things about it. That show has so many Easter eggs and feels so lived into Star Trek, and they answer and refute some of the many tropes of Star Trek, and do so in a brilliant way. I mean, one of my favorite examples of that is the character Tendi, who's an Orion. There's an episode, I think it's like the end of the first season, where this other character's on a holodeck, and she's trying to be like the bad guy, and she has the rest of her friends as the crew, and she, of course, dresses Tendi as the sexy Orion pirate girl, and Tendi kind of, like, I have a problem with this. We haven't been this way for almost 5 years now. This is not us. Speaking to that idea of the kind of weird stereotypes in Star Trek. So to that end, what I really think here is, if you're going to make another G.I. Joe movie, and I kind of skipped over Snake Eyes, but I watched it, and it was forgettable. It really was. It was so much of we want a cool ninja movie that we eschewed really cool shots. It looked cool on film. Yes, that backflip, that sword flurry looked awesome, but the plot was garbage. And that's the thing. You can get people involved with these just by making the show interesting, making the show likable. So that's the first thing, is hire somebody who has passion. Hire somebody who knows this stuff. You've seen this, same thing with Doctor Who. A lot of the best showrunners for the new series of that have been fans. Peter Capaldi had written, fan letters in old Doctor Who magazines, it was later discovered. And so when you have these people who will argue for the brevity of the character, yeah, they're gonna make a better movie. Because they're not just in it for a paycheck. I think that when Jeff Johns started really taking over the DCEU, we saw an improvement with Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Shazam. And, the Marvel Universe has had a lot of that as well. These are people who are passionate about those characters, and thus, that's why Spider-Man worked. That's why, Captain America and Iron Man worked, whereas Fantastic Four hasn't so far. Tim Story, the guy who did the original Fantastic Four, had admitted he had no interest in comics and definitely no interest in Fantastic Four. Hard to really believe that these are the people we want. Same with Zack Snyder taking over the Justice League. I watched the Snyder Cut. It didn't impress me. The first one didn't impress me. Here's a guy who basically said my comic book interest stopped with heavy metal, and if I was going to do a Batman movie, I'd have him raped in prison. Get someone passionate for the project. That is job one. And to that end, and I know that this may seem insanely egotistical of me, one of my projects later on this channel will be to storyboard my own idea of what a G.I. Joe movie could look like. I'm going to use action figure photography and a lot of these classified figures to kind of tell a story that I think would make a good G.I. Joe movie. So as a quick preview to that, actually, for the story I want to tell, it would be set in the 80s. I intend to use Breaker here as my POV character, meaning that he will be the guy who is now joining Joe kind of forcibly. The idea that I have set up is that Cobra has already taken over a small country and is now threatening parts of Europe. We cut to Breaker in the army, in a communications satellite room working on stuff, when Gung Ho and Roadblock basically show up and say, "Congratulations, you've been honorably discharged," and he's confused and trying to work out the logistics of, well, you're wearing a Marines uniform, you're wearing an Army uniform, who the hell are you guys, and how the hell does this work, as they're escorting him off base, and his commander's confirming, yep, they're right, have a nice day, getting him onto a transport and heading him to Joe headquarters to find out the story. Personally, I would cast someone like Trey Crowder to play Breaker. As Breaker's from Alabama, the redneck liberal comedian Trey Crowder, I think, would be a great choice, both to show off that, kind of kick back on the old stereotype of people from the South being rednecks or morons or, buck-teeth yokels, having a guy who is, again, from the South, with a brain, Because again, you know, inclusivity and breaking those stereotypes works in all directions. You know, the same thing will be true. You know, I would like to have Stalker in the cast and make him a badass. You know, really kind of delving into these characters more. So it's something I am working on slowly. If you guys have interest in it, let me know. And if you don't, let me know that too. Maybe I won't do it. So that was basically my rant on the G.I. Joe movies and really where I think they need to go and why I think they need to go that way. You know, and why these things aren't working the way that Hasbro would like. Why, you know, Snake Eyes merchandise didn't just fly off the shelves, but, you know, we can't keep classifieds in stock. So kind of that I'm done with that for now, because I also want to talk about another thing. This is kind of an attack onto this video, and I apologize for kind of doubling up on subjects. I know a lot of people saw my 3D printed VAMP, and I know it's not much further along, and I'm going to explain some of that here right now. I'd shown this off on Grindhead Jim's channel a couple places, and there'd been some interest, absolutely, and it hasn't got much further because right after I had talked to him, I was waiting on filament to arrive, got my filament, and the heated bed died on me. So I'm now waiting on a replacement bed. Not a big deal. It should be here on Friday, and we'll get this guy right up and running. There will be pictures as I go, and in fact, I'd like to maybe start looking at, if people are interested, maybe doing some primers on 3D printing and how that evolves. And speaking of which, the guns for the Baroness here and Breaker are actually 3D printed mock-ups made in resin. So to that end, I am going to make one of these. I have decided, though, I'm not going to sell them. The reason being, this model was created by a guy named Joe's on Thingiverse. It is available publicly, but it's also his model. This would be like me profiting from burning a CD and calling it my album. It's just not genuine. I will make a few, one for myself. I did kind of, you know, Jim kind of asked for one, and I'm going to go ahead and make it. But again, I'm not going to be profiting off of it. I'm going to, you know, basically pay what I paid for it. I'm going to make a third one, though, that I will do a random giveaway for once we hit 100 subscribers. I think that would be a cool way of doing that. And again, if you can't find one in your area, I'd be happy to help you with some of that. There are plenty of people who do 3D printing services. The model is free on Thingiverse if you just do a search for G.I. Joe VAMP. It explains in the instructions that to make it for the classified scale, you want to bring this up to 165% of what it is currently. This model is originally designed and intended for 3 3/4 inch figures, but can be done, as seen here, in the bigger scale. So that's kind of my plan for that, and I've noticed we've gotten a lot of more subscribers lately, and I want to thank you guys for joining us and checking in. I hope you're liking what you're seeing. And again, thank you for watching. Hit like, share, subscribe, and all that, of course. And in the meantime, happy playing, and I bid you adieu.